folks, I will introduce to you Raul Labrador. I'm very glad he's here. I've been following him for several years, and I've been very impressed. I do know that he has been recently endorsed by Mike Pompeo, which made me feel very good. So, here you are, Raul Labrador. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just turn it on.
There's a switch.
Hello. Is that better? I'm Raul Labrador. I'm excited to be here today. I'm running to be your next Attorney General. And I want to give you a little background about myself and then tell you why I'm running for Attorney General, and then give you a little bit of time to ask any questions that you may have. I've been married to my wife for 30 years. We have 5 children. We have 2 grandchildren and 1 grandchild on the way, which we're really excited about. It's our daughter. It's her first child. And she's going to move in with us. Actually, I don't share this with people very often, but I have some old friends and people that know us from a long time ago. So my wife's father studied for the bar in his mother-in-law's house. I studied for the bar in my mother-in-law's house, and my son-in-law is going to study for the bar in my home. So we have 3 generations of lawyers that have been studying for the bar with their first child while they're living with their in-laws. So either we have a bad habit or a good habit. I'm not sure how you look at that, but it's pretty exciting, and we're really excited to have them coming to us. Our children are doing really well. We just became empty nesters, and my wife, who couldn't be here tonight, we just bought a business, and she was working all day in the business while I'm running for office. I do the fun stuff, and she does the hard work, and she's been working all day, so she couldn't come with us today. But as you know, I served in Congress for 8 years, and I represented this area for 8 years, and I've always been a strong conservative. I was one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus. Who's heard of the Freedom Caucus? So, Ron DeSantis, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, myself, and 5 other members of Congress, we got together and we decided that we wanted to hold our party's feet to the fire, that we needed to have somebody who would stand up for the principles that Republicans are supposed to stand for. Everyone campaigns on Republican principles. Everyone campaigns on being a strong conservative. But when you get back to Washington, D.C., not everyone is a strong conservative. A lot of people actually cave in and give in to the leadership. In fact, when I don't know how many of you remember, I got elected in the race in 2010, which was the Tea Party year. And we had about 60 members of Congress, 60 new Republicans who got elected to Congress. And when we went back there, I was so excited because I had been in the legislature here, and I had been a staunch conservative. I've been one of the leaders of the conservative movement in the Idaho House. And when I went to Washington, D.C., I assumed that I had like 60 other people just like me who were going to Washington, D.C. to fight. So the first week that I'm there, I had already made friends with a few people, and I tend to be a backbencher. I tend to sit in the back, so all of us were sitting in the back, kind of talking to each other, talking about how great it was that we were in Washington, and we were going to change the way Washington was working. We were going to do what we said we were going to do. And the Speaker of the House at the time, John Boehner, gets up, and he speaks to us, and he tells us, well, you guys need to understand that campaigning is different than governing. And when you're governing, you can't always keep all the promises that you made. And I'm looking around thinking, wait, all 60 of us got elected to keep the promises that we made. And I thought there was going to be a revolution, that we were going to go in and just take over what was happening in Washington. And he spent about 15 minutes talking to us about how we needed to understand that we needed to compromise, that we were going to be able to keep all the promises that we made. And somewhere, and I think maybe this is why I always sit in the back, there was somebody in the front who stood up and said, Mr. Speaker, you got us here, so we're going to do whatever you need us to do to make sure that we make you proud. And then another person stood up and he said, Mr. Speaker, we have your back. We want to make sure that we always have your back. And I stood up and said, with all due respect, I didn't come here to make you happy. I came here to keep the promises that I made to my constituents. And what made me sad is that I knew people in Washington were going to change and they were going to cave, but I assumed it would take years or months.
Minutes.
It took 1 week. And that's one of the reasons that we started the Freedom Caucus, because we realized that in Washington, D.C., people wanted to be liked more than they wanted to do the right thing, and they wanted to please leadership. And why do you think they wanted to please leadership? Why would you want to please leadership? What did you say? Get jobs? What else?
You get elected to leadership.
You get elected to leadership? Why else? Committees. It was all about committees and climbing the ladder. In fact, there was every quarter there was a big trip that every member of Congress who was playing along with leadership went on, and those trips were to like the poshest places in the United States. And you would go meet with a bunch of donors, and when you met with those donors, that meant that you could raise a lot of money for your campaign. How many times do you think I got invited to that in 8 years that I was there? 0 times. I was never invited because I was not willing to play the game. In fact, about a few years ago, it was about the 6th or 7th year that I was in Congress, the Idaho Statesman wrote a story about me. And in that story, they went through all the things that I had done in Congress, all the fights that I had been in. And it wasn't supposed to be the most flattering story, but they had this paragraph that I loved where they said, Raul Labrador has been in Congress for a long time, and Washington hasn't changed him. And they meant it as an insult, but I took it as a source of pride, that I was there for a long time and I didn't allow Washington, D.C. to change me. So that's who I am, and that's who I've always been. I will tell you what I believe. I will tell you what I want to do. I keep my promises. We're not always going to agree. Sometimes we may actually disagree on issues. But I'm going to explain to you why we disagree on the issue, and at least I want you to understand why I'm coming to the conclusions that I'm coming to. But now, I want to tell you why I'm running for Attorney General. Do you guys know that we have an Attorney General who's been in that office for 20 years? Yes. And worse than that, he has been he was the Attorney General for 20 years, the elected Attorney General. Before that, he was the Deputy Attorney General for 10 years. Which means that he has been in that office for 30 years. A couple of weeks ago, we were traveling the state and we stopped at a grocery store. At the grocery store, this really friendly guy came up to me and says, Raul, I'm so excited that you're running for Attorney General. I said, oh, thank you. It's good to see you. We got to know each other. He says, I want to tell you that I went to law school with the Attorney General. And I'm like, oh, really? So tell me about that. And he says, I think he's a great guy. I think I've been friends with him for 40 years. But he's changed. And he's not the same person he was when he went into the Attorney General's office. And I said, what do you think has changed? And it's interesting because he repeated something that I've actually heard the Attorney General say many times. He thinks his job is to represent the government and the bureaucracy. And that should not be the job of the Attorney General. I think the job of the Attorney General should be to represent the people of Idaho and to stand up for the Constitution and to defend the statutes of the state of Idaho. And I wish I were exaggerating, but I've been on the stage with him numerous times where we've done debates or forums, and he will tell the audience that the job of the Attorney General is to represent the government, the bureaucracy, and the governor of the state of Idaho. In fact, he says that I'm wrong when I say that the job of the Attorney General is actually to stand up for the rights of the people of Idaho. Is that the kind of Attorney General that you want? Yeah. You want the Attorney General that stands up for the people of Idaho, right? Yes. All right. So that's why I'm running for Attorney General. The greatest fights, the greatest battles for the soul of our nation right now are happening in the courts. The greatest battles for the soul of our nation and for the soul of our state are happening in the courts. And that's why we need an aggressive Attorney General who understands what the fight is. I think after being in that office for 30 years, I don't think he even understands what the fight is. He's got a cushy job that he doesn't have to work that hard doing it, but he doesn't understand that the job of the Attorney General is to look out for the interests and the rights of the people of Idaho. And that's what I want to do as your Attorney General. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 examples of some of the things that he has done that will, so it's not just words, but it's action, so you understand why he has failed at the job that he's doing. Number one, how many of you know that we're in the middle of almost 2 years of a pandemic and an emergency from it? Everybody knows that, right? Do you know why we're almost at 2 years of an emergency order? Money? What else? Power. Does anybody know what the statutes of the state of Idaho say about the power of a governor to issue emergency orders?
30 days.
It's 30 days, and then what?
It's 30 days.
And it can be extended for another 30 days. Now I want to explain to you what that means. The emergency powers that the governor has, I actually have some conservative friends who said he should never have that power. I'm like, no, I think he should. Because there are times when we have emergencies. Imagine if there's a dam that breaks in the state of Idaho. Do we have the time to call the legislature in and call them into session so we can make decisions how to spend money, how to organize things? We don't have time for that. So the governor should have 30 days and maybe extend it for an additional 30 days. Because what the legislature did is they gave up some of their power to the governor in cases of emergency. These are all actions that the legislature should make. The legislature decides how to spend money. The legislature decides all those different things. So I don't have a problem with the governor having that emergency authority. However, that's why they limited it to 30 days and an extension of 30 days. So if that's what the statute says, why do you think we're at almost 2 years of a state of emergency? Because 2 years? Lawrence Boston. Why do you say that?
Because he has told the governor that he can do this.
He told the governor that 30 plus 30 meant 30 plus 30 plus 30 indefinitely, as long as he needs to have that power. And he actually stood on a stage with me and he said that his job is to justify legally whatever the governor wants to do. That's not the job of the Attorney General. The job of the Attorney General is to tell the governor what the statutes and the Constitution allow him to do and to prevent him from doing anything that is outside of the statutes and the Constitution. So that's example number one. Now, how many of you have watched, example number two, how many of you have watched the fights between the governor and the lieutenant governor? It's sometimes been kind of fun, right? Sometimes they haven't been that much fun. I've actually, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've been in agreement with some of the things that the lieutenant governor has done. I've been in disagreement with some of the things that the lieutenant governor has done. So I'm not here to defend the lieutenant governor, but I'm here to defend her right to do it. The lieutenant governor is the acting governor, according to our Constitution, whenever the governor leaves the state of Idaho. In fact, for over 100 years, we've had that in our Constitution. And every time the governor has left the state, the lieutenant governor becomes the acting governor. In fact, how many of you know that we had a governor who was a Democrat and a lieutenant governor who was a Republican? We had that several times. And the governor would leave, and the lieutenant governor would do things that the governor didn't like. No one in the history of Idaho argued that the lieutenant governor didn't have the authority, or that the lieutenant governor wasn't the acting governor when the governor left. But why do we have a question now? Why are we in the middle of a constitutional crisis? Does anybody know? Because the Attorney General issued an opinion that says that the governor could justifiably, remember what I said earlier, could justifiably interpret the Constitution to mean that when he leaves the state, he continues to be the governor of the state, and he continues to, and he doesn't need to in any way communicate or let the lieutenant governor know that he's outside of the state. And that's not what the Constitution says. Now he said, this is what the Attorney General said, that because of modern communication, because you can communicate with the state by telephone or some other means, that we can reinterpret what the Constitution says. That's not what you want an Attorney General to do. Now, we could, maybe as a people, we decide we want that to be what the Constitution says, but that's not what it says right now. What the Constitution says is really clear. It's actually the shortest description of authority in the Constitution is the Lieutenant Governor. It says that the Lieutenant Governor presides over the Senate, and acts as the governor whenever the governor is either incapacitated, infirm, or outside of the state. It's pretty clear what the Constitution says, but this Attorney General has justified what the governor wants instead of defending the Constitution and the people of Idaho. I'm going to give you a third example. We have a family in North Idaho that bought a large piece of land. That family in North Idaho decided that they wanted to build on the land like most of us do when we buy a piece of land, and the EPA came in. The EPA told them that that piece of land was going to be subject to the Clean Water Act because they had a puddle of water on their property, and that puddle of water actually grows sometimes and then it shrinks. And because that puddle of water is part of the waters of the USA, this family needed to get a permit to do anything on their land. Like a good Idaho family, they told the EPA to go pound sand. And they went and they litigated in the courts and they sued the EPA. The EPA actually argued that they did not have standing. Does anybody know what that means? That they didn't have a right to sue the EPA in the federal courts. And they went all the way up to the Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court level, there were members of Congress who joined the family in the fight saying that they did have standing. I was one of those members of Congress. There were several Republican attorneys general that joined the family saying that they did have standing. Guess who didn't join the family?
Their own attorney.
Our own Attorney General. Their own Attorney General did not join the family, but it gets better than that. The family won at the U.S. Supreme Court, which doesn't happen every day. And the Supreme Court said, you do have standing, so go ahead and litigate. They went down to the lower court, and they litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court. They're before the Supreme Court again. There are 23 Republican attorneys general that have joined the family. Guess who's missing from that fight? Their own attorney general. But it gets better than that. I wish I was lying to you. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was on the stage again with the Attorney General, and I told this story to the crowd. And he said, well, I'm going to join them now. So he's either absent or late to every single significant fight that we have in the state of Idaho, because he thinks his job is to defend whom? The governor and the bureaucracy, and not the people of Idaho. I'm going to give you 1/4 example, and then I'll close and then stand for questions. How many of you saw the picture on national TV of the swimmer, the male swimmer that was swimming in the transgender swimmer swimming in the competition, and there were 3 female swimmers on the right? Do you remember that picture? So the state of Idaho was the first state that passed a law, if you remember, to prevent transgender individuals from swimming or from competing against female athletes. The state of Idaho passed a law, but the Attorney General of the state of Idaho wrote an opinion saying that transgender individuals have a constitutional right, an equal protection right to participate in female sports. So we're in the Ninth Circuit right now fighting. In fact, as a private attorney, I'm representing some of the girls that are fighting this battle. And the ACLU and the Ninth Circuit quotes the Attorney General of the state of Idaho every single time that they say that this is unconstitutional. In fact, they say even the Republican Attorney General of the state of Idaho thinks that this is unconstitutional. So they're citing him in their briefs, and the Ninth Circuit is citing them in their opinions. They're citing the Attorney General of the state of Idaho. So the people of Idaho have lost trust in the Attorney General. The legislature has lost trust in the Attorney General. I have over 33 legislators that are endorsing the administration because they want a new Attorney General in the state. Some of the agencies, the members of the different agencies that he represents, have lost trust in the Attorney General. I have lost trust in the Attorney General. How many of you have hired an attorney in your lives? What happens when you lose trust in your attorney?
I can't.
You can. You fire him. It's time to fire the Attorney General of the state of Idaho. I'm Raul, Labrador, and I hope to be your next Attorney General.
So if the governor would continue his state of emergency and you would be the Attorney General, what can you do?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, he stole my thunder. So when people used to ask me, what's the first thing you're going to do as Attorney General? And for the last 4 months, I've been saying the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end the state of emergency. I don't know if you noticed that about a week ago he announced that he's going to end it on April 15th. So I can't say that anymore, but I take full credit for that. Because I've been saying that in every single event that that's the first thing I'm going to do. So the first thing I would have done is I would have issued an opinion saying that the state of emergency is over, that he cannot continue to act without calling the legislature in, and that he has a duty and responsibility to call the legislature in. Now I'm going to be really honest. I hope you guys know I'm strong, but I'm a pretty soft-spoken guy. I don't go around yelling at people and doing, unless somebody needs it. But I probably would have called him on the phone first and talked to him about what the Constitution says, what the statutes say, why I believe the previous Attorney General had been wrong in his interpretation, and explain to him that I don't think my job is to justify his actions. My job is to stand up for the people of Idaho, for the Constitution. And I can tell you that that probably would have been enough. And I'll give you an example where I know it would have been enough. About 2 years ago, I was the chairman of the Republican Party for 6 months. It was not my favorite job. It's not a job I wanted, but we had a scandal in the party, and I was asked by several of my friends to run for that. I didn't really want it, but I went ahead and did it, and I won. And I did that for about 6 months. At the time, the governor's office called me as the chairman of the party and said that they were going to change the primary from May till August. And I asked them a simple question: what authority do you have to change the primary from May till August? And they said, well, the Attorney General says that we can't. I said, well, the Attorney General is wrong. There's nothing in the statute, even under your emergency powers, that gives you this authority. And they said, no, the Attorney General assures us that we have the authority. I said, well, let me call you back. I called a few friends. I did a little bit of legal research, and I came back and said, I've done the research, and I've talked to some lawyers, and if you change the primary from May till August, I'm going to sue as chairman of the party, and you know you're going to lose. And they said, well, let me call you back, and about 30 minutes later, I got a call back. I said, oh, never mind, we're not going to do it. I didn't need to go yell at him. I didn't need to get in the front page of the paper. I didn't need to do any of those things. I just needed to do my research and to have a stiff spine and to tell them that if they did this, we were going to sue and they were going to lose. So that's what I would do. I would have done with the emergency order or any other action that he does that is unconstitutional or outside of the statute. I would stand up because, again, it's not the job of the Attorney General to justify what the governor is doing. It's the job of the Attorney General to ensure that the agencies and the governor and all the other elected officials are following the law and the Constitution. Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered, you had some dealings with the Attorney General.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you. But the staff there probably runs according to his beliefs and his standards. And I just wondered what you're going to do to correct that, so when the public needs help from the Attorney General's office, they can at least get it.
That's a great question. So did you all hear that question? She's wondering about the staff. So there's two things that are going to happen. Immediately, I can tell you that the people who don't want to work for me are already looking for a job because they know that he's going to lose. So they're already looking, they're already doing a job search, and the people who really don't want to work for Raul Labrador as Attorney General are going to be gone. And I think that's a good thing because I won't even have to fire them. They're just going to be gone. But the second thing I'm going to do is when I go in there, I actually believe that sometimes people do the job incorrectly, not because they're bad people, but because they have bad leadership.
Correct.
And I think right now there's a lot of them that want to do the job correctly, but they haven't been properly trained or properly led by this Attorney General. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to interview every one of the attorneys. It's going to take me a while. There's about 120 attorneys. I'm going to interview every one of them individually. I'm going to ask them what they think their role is. I'm going to tell them what I think it should be. And if they agree with me that that's what it should be, I'm going to give them the proper training.
Do we need 120 lawyers?
We probably do, because there's all the agencies in the state of Idaho are represented by the Attorney General's office. Every single constitutional officer in the state of Idaho is represented by the Attorney General. So there's a lot of work for the Attorney General to do. I will also find out if there's some things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing. But really, the reality is that we probably need to start out by making sure that we keep the attorneys that are there that are good. Like I said, many of them will leave. Maybe we won't have to replace some of them. But I don't want to promise you something that I promise I can't keep, like I said earlier. I don't know what the needs are until I'm actually in the office. And I need to make sure that I'm judicious in the things that I do, that I make good decisions, that I study what everybody's doing. But I'm going to interview every one of them. And I've had experience with this at a smaller scale. When I was a member of Congress, we had to hire 15 people in my congressional office. And there were many people who would come to work for me from other congressional offices that had, let's say, bad habits, what they were doing in the other congressional offices. And what I will tell you, one thing that we always found is, in other congressional offices, when they worked with the agencies, if the agencies told the staff that they couldn't help, the staff would say, oh, okay, and then just send a letter saying we couldn't help. I always told them to go one extra step. To say, if they say they can't help, you ask them why not. What in the statutes or the regulations prevents you from helping that individual? And we ended up actually getting a lot of people help who were not getting help in other congressional offices. And when I taught my staff to do that, to just change that mindset just a little bit, so many of my staff would say, thank you, I'm actually enjoying my job now because we're helping people instead of just telling people, no, we can't do anything for you. We're actually helping people get the benefits that they needed or the issues resolved that they need to resolve. So that's going to be my philosophy, and I'm going to assume that many of them are actually in public service because they want to serve the public. And I'm going to make sure that they do it the right way.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Who do you believe is the most important and most powerful law enforcement officer in the state?
Oh, that's a good question.
Wow.
It depends. So I actually disagree with that a little bit. I think the sheriff is the most important in the county.
In the county.
But not in the state.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. But they have sovereign power over their county, regardless of what the state says, correct?
No.
They don't necessarily have to.
No. So this is I'm going to get into a philosophical difference with you here. Remember, the counties were created by the states. And the states created the union. The most powerful sovereign in both of those relationships is the state. However, the sheriff has certain constitutional responsibilities and duties that other law enforcement agencies don't have. And wherever the Constitution speaks to them, they are supreme in that area. But I think there's a confusion, and I know a lot of people who argue the constitutional sheriff, and I'm saying that I disagree with it. It's just that I don't want people to forget that it's the states that created this union and created the municipalities. And the state, in most instances, is supreme. That's why I think a state, for example, the state legislature can tell the counties what they can and cannot do. And in every single instance. Now, is it smart to be telling the counties what they can and cannot do? Probably not. You probably need that local jurisdiction. So I have a little bit of difference of opinion, but yes, when the Constitution speaks about what the powers of the sheriff are, and in law enforcement specifically at the county level, they have more jurisdiction than the feds or anybody else. And I agree with you there.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the instance that you were talking about with Governor Little,
yes,
extending his 30 days.
Yeah, the sheriff's going to.
The sheriffs don't have to abide by it.
They don't, and in fact, you saw many sheriffs, and I applaud them, you saw many sheriffs that said, we are not going to enforce any mask mandates.
Right.
We're not going to enforce any of those things, and I think they had the right and the authority to do
That's
that.
kind of where I'm headed.
Yeah, so,
When
I just want to be
something's
precise about that, because
Yeah.
sometimes I get into this argument with a lot of my constitutional friends. It's not that I disagree with them, but I do think the state sometimes has, it just depends on the issue. The state sometimes has much greater jurisdiction than the counties. But you're right, I'm so grateful for all the sheriffs that said, no, we're not going to enforce those mandates. Absolutely. Yes.
So you say you're going to be aggressive.
Yes.
Well, being aggressive to me, what I've always bothered me is that you've got these other states that are, all coming together to file these lawsuits. I keep waiting for Idaho to jump on that.
Yes.
I keep waiting for Idaho to jump on it. And then maybe a little bit down, a long ways down the road, they may. So you need to
That's why I'm saying that he's either absent or late to every single fight.
Every time.
Yeah, so I have two friends that are current AGs. I'll tell you guys, maybe 3 years ago, I wasn't thinking about running for Attorney General. It's something that I had never really thought about. I had been in Congress, I had been in the legislature, I had run for governor, and I had never really thought about running for Attorney General. But about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I can't remember the precise time, but I got a call from my two friends who are current AGs. They said, every time we get in a fight with the federal government, your Attorney General is absent from that fight.
Every time.
Said every single time. He said, in fact, there was one instance where 24 of the 25 Attorneys General were together, and he decided to stay out of the fight. And so we couldn't even have a unified, all-Republican fight with the administration. And they said, we need you. And I had never really thought about it, frankly, about running for Attorney General. And I thought, okay, maybe I need to start thinking about this. Because I was frustrated, just like everybody else, with the things that were happening at the federal level, with the things that were happening here at the state level, with the mandates, with all the different things. In fact, I was so frustrated that I asked to be appointed to the CDH board, to the Central District Health Board, just so I could do something, just so I could actually participate in the process. So when they called me and they said, we really need you to do this, I started thinking about it. So that's what I mean about being aggressive. Is not only do I want to not be late, sometimes I want to be the first one. Yeah, sometimes we just need to be the ones that file the lawsuit instead of waiting for other states. But what we have is an organization of Republican Attorneys General, and they get together all the time and they're talking about all these issues. And every single time that they get together on an issue, our current Attorney General is absent from those fights. And we just need to make sure that we join or lead in many of those fights. So that's what I mean.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
As I'm campaigning around the county commissioner, people are asking me, I'm asking them what issues are important. And one is coming up, not so much county oriented, but people are saying we want to stop the refugees that are coming in. And I have to explain to them that the state of Idaho can't do that, because in the 1990s, the state of Idaho became a Wilson Fish state and gave up that right. And there's a non-governmental agency that now is the Office of Refugees for the state of Idaho. What can we do to change that?
It's a great question. So, it's mostly a federal issue, and we tried to fix that issue at the federal level when I was in Congress. And that was one of my most frustrating things, is that we had some solutions for that would have allowed, I actually had a bill that would have allowed governors to determine whether they wanted to accept refugees or not. So one of the things we need to do is, going back to your question, is we need to start looking at how legally we can start fighting the federal government on these refugee grants. We can't tell them whether they can grant refugee status or not, but whether they can bring them to our state. The one thing where I'm certain that we can fight on is all these flights of illegal aliens that are coming into our state. And that's something, that's not refugees, that's just illegal aliens that they're flying into the different states. And I actually want to lead on one of those lawsuits against the federal government and prevent them from doing that. But we need to figure out what the legal doctrine, and it's going to take some time. I don't have a straight answer for you, But we're going to take the time to look at the legal doctrine to prevent the federal government from bringing so many refugees. Right now, Idaho is the 4th largest refugee participant in the United States, and it shouldn't be. And we need to be very careful about that. Absolutely. Okay, let's do one more question.
First, a quick statement. Seems like the current Attorney General is the governor's personal attorney on the taxpayer's dime.
Yes.
So that's what it seems.
And he will tell you that that's his. I wish I were exaggerating, but he says he is the governor's personal attorney, and that's not what the statute says. The governor actually has a personal attorney. He has an attorney that represents the governor's office and gives him legal advice. The Attorney General is the attorney for the states. And in fact, he said the other day, well, I'm the attorney for the state of Idaho. And I'm like, well, who is the state of Idaho? It's you guys. It's the citizens of the state of Idaho. He thinks the state of Idaho is the bureaucracy. Anyway.
So, describe in your opinion the difference between individual liberties and like for the greater good. It's like mandates are for the greater good.
Yeah.
But not having those mandates is more about individual liberties.
So I believe the citizens of Idaho should be free to choose whatever course of action they do when it comes to their vaccines and anything dealing with this pandemic. I don't think the government should be telling you what to put in your body. They shouldn't tell you how to, whether you should work, whether you're an essential employee or anything like that. You should have a choice. And the government should only be protecting, in some small instances, the most vulnerable. And that's why we did everything wrong in the pandemic. We should have been protecting the sick and infirm instead of shutting down the entire society where, we were actually shutting down people who weren't sick, who weren't at risk of having COVID or anything like that. There's things that the government can do, but individual liberties, that's what, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, and this is where I completely disagree, and I think this is where we have two different visions. The Declaration of Independence says that government was created for a purpose. What is that purpose of the Declaration of Independence says?
Protect our borders, protect the people.
Close, protect the freedoms of the people. That's why government was instituted, is to protect the rights and the freedoms and the liberties of the American people. And so when they created this, in the Declaration of Independence, when they declared independence from the other side, they had a tyrannical government that was supreme, where the king was supreme, and there were king's lawyers. Their job was to protect the king, to make sure that the king could justify every action that they did. We switched to a government that was supposed to protect the people, protect the freedom and the rights of the people. That's why I think when the Constitution and the statutes say that the Attorney General represents the state of Idaho, they represent the people of Idaho and ensure that the government is not encroaching on the rights of the people of Idaho. And that's the main reason why we need a new Attorney General. Thank you so much. I want you to go to our website. It's Labrador2022.com. We have some flyers in the back. You can donate to our campaign. We just did a poll 2 weeks ago, and we're ahead by double digits. But please, but don't be fooled. They're going to be attacking me. They're going to be coming after me. Do you think the people in power want me to be the Attorney General?
No.
So we need you to help. The only way we're going to stay there where we are right now is by making sure that we have enough funds and enough resources to get our message out. We're going to spend about $100,000 on radio ads. We're going to send out about 5 or 6 mailers, and each one of them costs $50,000 to $60,000 to mail. It's not cheap to run these elections. So I need you to help. I need you to tell your friends. We have signs. Please donate, do whatever you can, but we cannot do this without you. So thank you very much, and God bless.